Hello and welcome to another Thursday interview here on Viking TV. The past year has been an extraordinary meeting of minds here on Viking TV. And today, as we'll look on our planet with a celebrated explorer, I just thought it would be fascinating to reflect on some of the amazing people who have done that in their various different ways for us. From NASA astronaut and the first mother in space, Annelie Fisher there in that wonderful, iconic shot. And there she is as godmother of the Viking Orion. And we've got Kathy Sullivan as well, yet another astronaut who joined us. And she is the one, of course, who was very much an engineer on the team that launched the Hubble telescope. And she told me how incredibly proud she was, not only of her NASA career, but of that particular spanner or hammer or whatever it was that she actually designed and engineered so that it could be held and manipulated by an astronaut to fix whatever it was that needed fixing on the Hubble. And then, of course, we met Rick Linehan, who's the first vet in space and who now rescues animals imperiled by climate change and pollution. And then, of course, we also met polar explorers Liv Arneson and Anne Bancroft, both of whom are going to become Viking godmothers to Viking's new expedition ships. Then, of course, we also met environmental campaigner Robin Hanbury-Tennyson and ocean rower Mick Dawson. And as if that wasn't enough, Arctic musher Thomas Werner, and the author and cyclist Marika van der Meer. And what I found fascinating about meeting all of them, that to a man and woman, they all agreed that the more you explore, the more you respect the planet, its various peoples and species. And certainly this is true of those who've been into space and looked back on our amazing globe, because they've all said, and look at you, we can see it there in that lovely Earthrise picture from Apollo 8, that when you look at the Earth, you see an interactive whole world. There are no tags, there are no borders, no name tags. And that's something they all very much agreed on. They often say that after a terrible year throughout the world, and 1968 was indeed a terrible year, Apollo 8 saved the year by broadcasting that image at Christmas. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, I certainly am, but someone who's even older than me, the acclaimed broadcaster and environmental champion, Sir David Attenborough, has said as a warning to us all about the way we should look after our planet and its natural species. What we do in the next few years will determine the next few thousand years. Now, not many have taken those words more to heart, more seriously, and more practically than my next guest, because he has travelled, actually walked, to parts of our planet where very few have ventured, and he's met the people and encountered the animals that spell out that narrative, sometimes bleakly, sometimes hopefully. And he's told their stories in a way that we can all read and watch and learn to understand, and in programmes and books and photographs that have won him respect and acclaim. Over the years since he left the British Army, he's ventured almost everywhere and met some extraordinary and dangerous people. Now, my guest called his last book, The Last Giants, that book about that, and it's absolutely intriguing, and it's documented the rapid decline of one of the world's favourite animals, and even postulates a future when we may no longer have elephants at all, such is their peril at the hands of us humans, or at least some of us humans. But there's so much more to talk about too. So let's meet the man who Sir Michael Palin described as having breathed new life into adventure travel. Sir Michael was here with us on Viking TV only a few weeks ago. Travelled all over the world, a real globetrotter. But as I said, he says of my next guest, he's breathed new life. He's sort of passed on that baton to my guest today, explorer, adventurer, filmmaker and photographer of the present and the next generation, Levison Wood. Hello there, Levison.
Hello, Anne. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. Mind you, you look as though you're in a bit of a tame background at the moment. The last year must have been very frustrating for you.
I am indeed. I'm here in London. It's been a bit of a tricky year, actually. You know, for someone like myself, you know, you could appreciate this when you're used to traveling so much. I'm normally about 8 or 9 months of the year away, so it's been a hard one to be stuck in the UK and to be desperately looking forward to getting back on the road again very soon, hopefully.
Are you? Can you be very domesticated? Have you learned anything about yourself in this enforced period of almost isolation?
Well, I think we've all had to come to terms with a bit more of a sedentary lifestyle, in recent months, and I, for one, have just had to try and embrace it and take up new hobbies. And rather than walking the length of the Nile, just walking along the Thames has had to suffice for now. So it's been okay. I mean, I found it quite tough, but I've taken up a few new hobbies along the way. I've done lots of painting.
Tell us a hobby, because I find so many people have done this.
Yeah, it's been quite fun. I've always been interested in art and painting, so I've done a bit more of that. Tried to teach myself the guitar, failed miserably. But lots of writing, lots of reading, of course, and just very much looking forward to getting back on the road again.
I'll bet. Yeah. Where's the first place you will go when you can?
Well, it looks like, according to the new green list, probably Portugal. It's the only place that's really open, isn't it?
It's funny, isn't it, that it's been lockdown, and learning about yourself and even taking up new hobbies it's because it's happened all over the world, because it's been a pandemic. Do you think it's given us humans a sort of a common experience?
I think so. I think what it has given us is this sense of community that often, particularly we in the West, forget about. And I think it probably has, apart from all the tragedy and the sadness that's gone with it, of course. Hopefully, if any good has come of it, it's that sense it has brought people together and given them something to rally around. And so hopefully we'll continue with that sense of community beyond this.
Well, you're certainly ready to embrace getting out into the world again, because today is the publication day of your very latest book, and that's The Art of Exploration. It's fascinating that you call exploration an art.
Well, this book has been something that's been about 3 or 4 years in the pipeline, actually. It's been basically an idea that came to me after my last big expedition, which was around the Arabian Peninsula. I wanted to collate a lot of the themes and ideas and lessons that I'd learned from the last 15 or 20 years of traveling, and lay them out rather than what I'd done in previous books, which was a travelogue and describing a particular region. This is all the juicy stuff that didn't make it into the other books, you see, and the key learnings that I came away with from some of the inspirational people that I met along the way, like the Dalai Lama or just the local shepherd who hosted me for a cup of tea. It's people from every walk of life that I can thank for still being here today in one piece. And what people can take away from those lessons and hopefully apply to their daily life as well. So that's what I wanted to do with this book. And of course, lockdown has given me the time to apply that mental energy in getting all of this work together. So hopefully people will enjoy this book, which is very much a behind the scenes look at what my life has been like and how people can learn from that, hopefully.
It's interesting because you get out there and do it. You get out there and explore the world. Most of us sit back and read your book or watch your TV program, and we enjoy exploration from the comfort of our own armchairs. How do you feel then about people like us who explore vicariously through you? Do you think we're a load of snowflakes?
Not at all. Look, I think exploration can mean many things to many people. We're very much beyond the days of going out there with pith helmets and planting flags in the map. I think exploration is a state of mind often. It's about going away, being open-minded and coming back, hopefully, a changed person for the better. And you don't have to go necessarily to the back of beyond to do that. It's about having the right mindset. And this book is all about that. It's about what the explorer's mindset is, how you can apply it in any form of not just travels, but here at home as well. So it's a real mixed bag. I won't give too much away, but it really does go into the psychology and the practical implications as well of what exploration means. This isn't, what to pack in your rucksack for a hike in the woods. This is all about the kind of lessons that you can learn, as I said before, from inspirational characters, from theory, from history as well.
Yeah, I mean, you do say that you've got to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone. And most of us never want to do that. And you certainly have been to some very dangerous places as well. Not only the danger of the place, of the environment, but the people are often dangerous, that you've sometimes the people you've met. I mean, they're the places that most of us would just be too cowardly to go to. So when you come back and you look on it, do you prefer animals or people? Why was I more intrigued by your journey with elephants than sometimes your journey with people?
Well, for me, look, I think part of what I do is about changing people's mindsets, about changing people's perceptions, challenging stereotypes. And often what I found is, when we talk about people and dangerous places, more often than not, a lot of it is just hype, and you shouldn't believe everything that you see on the news, and we all know that. But often these ideas about certain places and regions are so ingrained in our psyche that you just write it off. And actually, I go to places like that often get misrepresented by the media in a bid to show that people are people wherever you go. And actually, I've been hosted incredibly well in what a lot of people would think are some of the most dangerous places in the world. That said, when I go and do journeys in the wilds and alongside elephants, that can be equally dangerous. I mean, I walked across Botswana following a herd of elephants a couple of years back, and that was incredibly dangerous. I was walking through national parks, very much at the mercy of the wildlife. But again, what I found myself was that it felt like a very natural state of being. We're humans that evolved out of Africa. That had been our most natural state of being for hundreds of thousands of years. And we often overlook that. And when we sit here in our sort of quite sedentary lives in the city or at home, we're kind of missing out on what it means to be a human. And walking out across Africa, being on constant alert that you're going to get eaten, yes, believe it or not, is quite an energizing and a natural state of play, and that's what as humans are designed to do.
I mean, your journey following the elephants was so intriguing, and there's some wonderful photographs. Did you make friends with any of those elephants? I mean, they have character, don't they? They have personality. Tell me about some of those elephants that you met.
Well, elephants, from what I found, and this is from many years of research, is that elephants are incredibly complex, very social beings, very family orientated, and they have the same, in many ways, the same social structure as human beings. They have a very matriarchal society, and when the teenage males get to a certain age, sort of 12, 13, off they go and join a gang of like-minded males. They go off on the rampage, and when they get a bit older, the old bulls disappear off on their own and go and be miserable. And it's actually a lot of relatable social themes that I encountered from elephants, and you see it. And actually, I had some amazing connections. The ones you want to stay away from are the teenage males. Yeah. Because they've got a point to prove. If you go and see an old bull, he's generally pretty confident in his stature and in his strength, that he's going to leave you alone. Of course, the most dangerous situation to be in of all is a mother and her calf, so you stay away from those. And I had these amazing interactions. But for me, probably the most poignant was going to an elephant sanctuary in northern Botswana, run by a charity called Elephants Without Borders. And they take in orphaned elephants. And I met these three beautiful young elephants who'd found themselves there through no fault of their own, through human-wildlife conflict or bushfires and things like that. It was just very, very sad. And it was a real reminder of the impact that us humans are having on the natural world, and a real, kick up the rear that we should do something about it.
Are they endangered?
Hugely. The elephant numbers across Africa have faced rapid decline over the last 100 years or so. The Asian elephants across Asia are even more danger, actually. There used to be something in the region of 12 million elephants in about 1900, and now we're down to 400,000 or so. So we faced huge decline. Poaching still an issue, of course. killing animals for bushmeat is a problem. Human-elephant conflict is the biggest problem of all, because more and more land is being turned over for agricultural use. And as the human population grows, inevitably more fences are put up, more roads are dug. And the elephants, who are reliant on going to their ancient ancestral watering holes, that they follow these routes for hundreds of thousands of years, they're getting chopped up into pieces. So the elephants are inevitably going to come into more conflict with people. And who comes off worse? The elephants.
We've got this remarkable picture that you discovered in the Sahara Desert of proof that once upon a time, elephants were in the Sahara.
That's right. Yeah. Until not that long ago, sort of 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, when the Sahara Desert was a lush, fertile savanna, elephants and all the other megafauna roamed freely all the way up to the Mediterranean coast, and their range has been shrunk over the last few thousand years because of climate change and so on. But now they're very much isolated in these tiny pockets. So really now is the time that we have to act to save this iconic species.
Would the world be, I mean, this sounds such a silly question, but I know there will be some people who say, look, species come and go. Would the world really be worse off without elephants?
Well, elephants are nicknamed the gardeners of the savannah. They're a keystone species. Elephants, by removing dead trees, they clear a path for other animals and other trees to flourish. They actually transport a lot of seeds in their dung. They basically create the natural landscape around them. And so without elephants, those landscapes will change forever, and that will have a huge knock-on effect for lots of other species. Not only that, we have a responsibility not only towards elephants but to every species. It's not just about these creatures; it's about every species to not have a negative impact on them, because they have just as much right to be here as we do, frankly.
And they're just extraordinary. I don't know why it is, but we love elephants, don't we? There's something about them. I think they just do have personality, and we can connect in some way. But as you said, maybe it's down to us humans to do something to help them. So what have your travels taught you about humans? I mean, you might conclude that at the end of all this, particularly looking at the species that are imperiled by us humans, that maybe you would conclude we're not very nice species at all.
Well, look, I think, we have had a huge impact on the earth around us. A lot of that, frankly, is inevitable, because as we grow, we have our own needs. But with those needs come responsibilities. And I think we are at a time in our history where we are, for the first time, really aware of the effects and consequences of our actions, that we can do something about it. And as technology improves and our own awareness and education improves, now is the time that we can do something to help. And lots of people are. So I'm trying to stay hopeful. I've seen incredible work being done by organizations, charities all around the world, not just in the fields of conservation, but looking after each other. So whilst we often see a lot of bad news on the TV, what's often overlooked is the good news. And I've been fortunate enough to see some amazing stories of resilience and hope, and people just looking after each other. And I think the fact that I'm still alive today probably is testament to the good spirits and hospitality of people all around the world. So I think we should all try and stay hopeful, but be serious in what we can do to help others and help the natural world.
Well, I've got a video clip here that some people may find almost quite alarming, but it shows the sort of people and the sort of dangerous situations you've got yourself into. It's called Arabia Sizzle. Should we have a quick look at that?
I'm traveling.
Ah,
A journey, a journey.
I know, I remember. You're a traveler.
Yes.
Yes. You're Discover.
Yes.
Discover area.
Okay.
Yes.
They're jubilant in Mosul.
Total devastation. Destruction like I've never seen. Look at this place. It's bloody beautiful. Suicide bombers like to blow themselves up in a crowded space. So. coming under contact from the left-hand side.
No idea what's going on.
Well, this is not what you think of when you think of Iraq. There's a feeling of high intensity.
This is the real Arabia. I'm hot, I'm thirsty, I've got massive bloody blisters.
Car's broken down, which is not ideal given the fact we're only a couple of kilometres away from the front line.
It's mad.
Enjoying your lunch?
You are Christian, you are Muslim, you are Hindu, anything. You are human.
I mean, Levison, just watching that video exhausts me. And that was made when you were crossing the Middle East. Now, that is a part of the world a lot of people might say that is, just somewhere I'm not going to go. It's too dangerous for me. So why do it?
Again, it comes back to challenging misconceptions, smashing a few myths, and shining a spotlight on the humanity, really, and doing all that without avoiding the obvious, without avoiding the conflict. And I'm not putting a gloss on anything. It's going there and showing the ground truth. And I don't go to these sorts of places with any agenda other than to go and see what it's really like, away from that sort of mainstream viewpoint. And yes, there is war and conflict in the Middle East, but there's also millions of people just trying to get on with their normal daily lives, and that fascinates me, along with the natural beauty of the place, and going to see places that very few people get to go and see.
And also to see how some people survive the most awful conditions, and conditions of almost constant warfare or something like that. I mean, that taxi driver was an extraordinary character.
And I've met thousands of people like him who, despite the odds, try and, look for some positivity. And it's that stoic, resilient mental attitude that I just find amazing, because it really is. If you're faced by poverty and war, if you've lost family members, then it would be all too easy to just want revenge and retaliation. But a lot of people don't. They just want to get on with their lives. And I find that very, very hopeful.
Do you thrive on danger, though? Does it switch you on?
Well, I don't think it's the danger. I wouldn't call myself, an adrenaline junkie. I just go to these places, and danger sort of seems to follow me rather than the other way around. But no, what I thrive on is that sense of purpose, and I like the contrast. I like to go to somewhere that there's a bit of edge and a tricky situations that I luckily have built up lots of experience over the last 20 years of traveling to kind of know what to do, and hopefully come out in one piece. And I've been very lucky so far. But I put that down often, or mainly really, to having a positive, a bit of faith in humanity. And if you do go into places like that with that attitude, generally speaking, you'll be all right.
You must have family and friends who worry about you, though.
Yes, of course. I think my mum sort of does tend to worry a little bit, but she knows I can look after myself, and every, my friends and family are all sort of used to it now, and it's just part of my life.
Yeah, he's off again. Absolutely. I wonder if he'll come home in one piece. You must have funny stories as well. That I know that you have, from time to time, had some really horrible things to eat.
Oh yes, oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's been all sorts of nasty things. I'll never forget the one time. I think I was on the South Sudan-Uganda border, and I was very, very hungry. Hadn't eaten for a couple of days and trekking. Finally found this village where a little old lady was boiling up some sort of stew or broth, and I asked what it was, and my guide and translator, Boston, he spoke French, and he said it's haricots viande, which is meat beans. And I thought, okay, well, meat beans, that sounds okay to me. And he ladled some of this meat beans into my bowl, and it just looked like rice and beans, but I thought that's fine. I wasn't too disappointed there wasn't any meat. Ate the lot, and Boston, my guide, was rolling around laughing. He said, "Did you enjoy it?" And I said, "Well, there wasn't any meat in." He said, "Oh, there was. You know, that wasn't rice, they were maggots." And what happened, they let the beans go completely rotten so that the maggots, you know, are there, and then they boil it up for a bit of extra protein.
Well, I was just going to say, I suppose that's protein.
Yeah.
And it's just best not to know, really.
Exactly, yeah. But that's one of quite a few nasty delicacies I've had to endure.
Yeah. You have to watch the translation, I think. Why do you like, I mean, you walk everywhere. Why do you like walking rather than anything else? I just wondered if there's something unique about traveling on foot, and whether people, when they see you coming, you're not in a car sometimes. I mean, obviously you are sometimes, but mostly you're just walking through their country. Are they more friendly towards somebody who's on foot?
Well, yeah, I think so. When you put yourself through the same dangers, I suppose, and are as vulnerable as the local people, and often when you're in Africa or India or wherever else, you know, people don't have that many cars, and so especially in the rural areas, walking is just the mainstay of getting around. So when you're doing the same, you're less of a threat. You have the same vulnerabilities, and so people are a lot more curious, and they tend not to view you as yet another foreigner or yet another tourist. It's just a fellow human being, and when you've got that connection, it opens doors, and people invite you into their homes, and people will look after you. And you know, that combined with the fact that I find walking just a wonderful way of seeing a country, very much at the slowest pace. It really gives you a sense of depth, and because you're forced to spend time in a place, you know, you're not just skitting around, going to see the sights, taking a photo, then back in the car. It means you're forced to have those interactions and those moments of serendipity that you might otherwise miss. And for me, it's those little encounters that make the journeys worthwhile.
And you're obviously not always on your own. Who do you travel with? And I know some of the time you always have a TV crew with you as well. So who are your usual companions?
So it depends how long the journey is, but for example, when I did my Nile journey, that was about 9 months long. So obviously they couldn't afford to send a crew out the whole time. So I think the crew came out 4 times for about a week-long period each time. So a lot of the time I was either just on my own, or I'd find local companions and local guides. So the crew comes and goes. I do the whole journey, and then along the way I'll try and pick up local people that want to come along and enjoy the journey as well. And you know, I'll pay them to be a guide for a week or a month or however long. And actually, I really enjoy that, because it's good to have somebody who knows the area, who can speak the language, but also knows the sort of cultural do's and don'ts, and somebody who can get me out of trouble if needs be.
Well, yes. And I wonder if sometimes if you have a TV crew with you, makes you stand out more from the crowd. So, I mean, it must be very different, sometimes being on your own, sometimes being with a crew. And are you a different person in front of the camera than you are when you're on your own?
I don't think so. I think actually, you know, you're right. The crew, if you've got a big crew, that can sometimes put people off. They don't want to open up as much. People get a bit nervous or suspicious, you know, perhaps. It's a lot easier to get people to tell their story if it's just me with a little handheld, you know, camera device. But in terms of, you know, I think when anyone starts out in TV, you sort of have to feel as though you have to kind of play up to the cameras. But actually, no, you know, I think hopefully what my journeys stand for is authenticity and that sense of rawness that comes with being tired, being exhausted, being on an expedition for months on end, walking. You can't play up to a camera that whole time. So I'm just me, and you know, that seems to have resonated.
Your first big adventure was, of course, walking the Nile. It's the book. What made you choose the Nile? I mean, it is an extraordinary river, obviously, but what made you think of, I'm going to walk from from the source to the very end?
So I left the army back in 2010, and I'd always wanted to be an explorer ever since I was a young boy. I'd always enjoyed writing and had, photography as my hobby. So being an explorer and being a travel writer was something that had always been on the cards. But I knew that I had to do one big journey to really set myself up. But that took a long time to get to. I spent 3 years after leaving the army doing all sorts of things. I worked, in Africa for charities. I was delivering ambulances. I was organizing guided treks across the Sahara. So I was spending a lot of time, particularly in East Africa. And one journey I ended up driving all the way from London down to Southern Africa. And a lot of that journey was along the Nile. And it was probably then that I had this idea. I was like, I wonder if anyone's ever walked it. So back in 2013, I thought, I'm going to go and do that. So I started the other end, in the south, on the Congo-Rwanda border. And yeah, put one foot in front of the other. And like I say, 4,250 miles, kept going, and eventually got to the Mediterranean Sea some 9 months later.
It is the longest river in the world, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And there we can see it there. So what an extraordinary journey. Actually, how long is that journey? No, I mean
4,250 miles.
Now, we may have got these pictures from that journey in the wrong order, so forgive me if we have. But just talk us through some of these. See, that's what most of us think of as the Nile.
Quite. That's Aswan. That's where a lot of people, visitors go and stay, and it's very beautiful. The feluccas on the river, gin and tonic on the terrace, and that very much is the sort of picturesque, romantic view of the Nile. But obviously, it can be quite different in parts.
Yes, and we'll see it. One great way to see it, of course, is by balloon, and you obviously grabbed that opportunity.
Yeah, I went. I couldn't resist. I went up, and actually, what was weird, because I'd been at ground level for 9 months, so it was only when I got to Egypt. I think this was in Luxor. I thought, okay, I'm going to go up and see what it's like from the air. And so it was the first time I'd seen the river from above, and it reminded me, wow, I've just walked a heck of a long way.
Yeah, and it really does unfold underneath you like a map, like a giant map, doesn't it? It's a very good way of appreciating the country you're in. These are wonderful shots there we were talking earlier about humans surviving in appalling conditions. Where's this?
This is a place called El Zabalin in Cairo, and this is it's the Christian quarter in Cairo, and to survive, to make money, these are the rubbish collectors, and they live amongst this enormous filth, and these kids have to go out and collect all the rubbish from across the city and sort it out into recycling. But it's a keen reminder of the immense poverty that goes on. But again, this sense of resilience, and despite these awful conditions, these kids would never stop smiling.
Absolutely. And of course, there were the iconic pyramids. Of course, you've got to go and see those. They still are extraordinary, no matter what else you see. Now, what are you doing there?
This was when I'd finished. This is the day I'd finished. I was very, very skinny, as you can see there. I ran into the Mediterranean Sea, Union flag in hand, and it was a very happy day. I was glad to be done by then.
I'll bet. But as I say, we have got some of these pictures in completely the wrong order, but never mind. Because even that, you see it unfolding like a map before you.
This is right at the beginning. This is Rwanda, known as the land of 1,000 hills. So I saw every kind of environment, deserts, forests, mountains, jungles. It was an extraordinary journey.
And you see the river grow and grow as you travel along.
Exactly. It started a tiny little spring in the forest and just went from a trickle into this beautiful, amazing river, and that's I think that's Murchison Falls in Uganda, another really beautiful place.
Yeah, and the character changes, the character of the people. You'll have to explain these, because this was a settlement of people you came across. Indeed. Who are extraordinary.
This is South Sudan, the Mundari tribe, and this is a cattle camp where this tribe of people who've just fled war in South Sudan. They live on these floating islands of papyrus in the middle of the swamps in the Nile, looking after their cows. And it's meeting these remote communities and you know, almost biblical scenes here that really gives me this wonder and joy of traveling, seeing lives very different from our own.
What were they like? How did they take to you?
Well, they don't get many visitors there in South Sudan, especially not you know, white people. So they were a bit curious. They were as curious about me as I was of them. And you can see here they live a very traditional life. They put the ash from the campfire on their faces to ward off mosquitoes. They shower using cow urine. They literally get under the back of a cow, and the ammonia in the urine turns their hair orange. Which they deem a very beautiful thing. So they all clamour to get under the back end of a cow.
Isn't that extraordinary? See, we wouldn't know that if you hadn't been there and discovered it.
Go to shop, go to Boots and buy some hair colouring, wouldn't you?
I just find that it's just incredible that you can still, on this planet, when we think we're so civilized, we've got the internet and we travel all over the world usually, and yet you can still stumble across just a tribe of people who are astonishing that you would never have known otherwise.
Exactly, and that's why I keep doing what I do, is to keep telling these stories, and hopefully people will find some inspiration in there.
Yeah. So after walking the Nile, which, as you say, took a good 9 months, and floating along the Nile as well, that looks like a dinosaur. What is that bird?
That's a shoebill, which is a type of bird that's very, very rare in Uganda.
I'll say. I mean, again, something that we wouldn't normally see. There you are having I was going to say having a nice beer at the end of the day, but it doesn't look as though you are there, but you're just enjoying the bar. But yeah, 9 months then, walking the Nile. You came back, you wrote the book and everything, and it sort of kick-started that sort of side of your career. You must have at some point then sat down and thought, well, where shall I walk next? And I'm thinking, there's your book, Walking the Nile. One of the places you thought, well, I'll travel the Himalayas. And so you had to plan that one. You must do an awful lot of logistical planning before you set off.
Yeah, often it's 6 months or sometimes even more, you know, planning. The Himalayas was another region that I'd always been fascinated in. I'd sort of done a bit of backpacking there when I was younger, loved Nepal, loved the mountains. And so I thought, why not apply the same logic of walking along this geographical feature to a region and find out more about it. So I thought, why not? So I started, this is in Afghanistan, place that I'd served when I was in the army.
Yes.
In the Hindu Kush mountains, and then traversed all of the Pamir mountains, the Karakoram, into the main Himalaya and all the way to the Tibetan plateau. And again, this was a journey. This took about 6 months, 2,500 miles, but a lot more ups and downs on this one.
Yes.
But it's been a really fascinating journey, and I met lots of really interesting people. I mean, this is playing buzkashi in Afghanistan. It's the national game, which involves horses, a dead goat, and not very many rules.
Yeah, and of course you would have also had to cope with the elevation. I mean, the fact that the air is thinner up there, but I suppose by then you were used to trudging your way through. You were acclimatized.
There were lots of challenges. Getting acclimatized to the altitude was one. Dealing with the exhaustion every day of going up and down mountains was another. But gravity was definitely an issue. I ended up having a pretty nasty car crash when I was out there. The one time I got into a taxi, it decided to drive off the edge of a cliff and I broke my arm. So I was very lucky to survive. It was a 450-foot fall straight off a sheer cliff in the jungle at night. So yeah, that was definitely a close call.
Did you have to go to I presume, is that it? Is that the picture?
Yeah, I went back to go and see. The car's still there to this day at the bottom of this jungle ravine. So there we go.
I'm surprised you survived. But again, you had to go to a hospital, get medical help of some sort?
I did, but it was just after the big earthquake in 2015. So all the hospitals were struggling. So it took 3 days to get rescued off that one because it was the monsoon season and helicopters couldn't fly.
There you are. You see, you're exposing yourself to a danger that you wouldn't even have been able to foretell in any way at all. But that takes us back to your new book, in a way, Exploration Being an Art. And I suppose you just have to adapt to constantly changing things, constantly different dynamics.
I think you're right. I think that's where the art bit comes in. It's born of experience. There's no set rules necessarily for every situation. A lot of it is just intuition, experience, following your nose, and applying a bit of common sense. So
you mentioned earlier that you had been in the army, which I can imagine is pretty good training for what you've now put yourself through. At one point, weren't you sort of like the private security guard to George Clooney?
That was after I'd left the army, yeah. But I spent 5 years in the paras, jumping out of planes and all that stuff. And I served in Afghanistan. And what a lot of people do when they leave the military to go and earn a bit of quick cash is go and do private security for a couple of years or so. So I did a bit of that on the side. I ended up I ended up looking after the Beckhams. I looked after George Clooney and all sorts of people, and it was quite fun. It was never going to be what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but it certainly opened my eyes to different ways of living.
Absolutely. Mind you, most of that, I know the George Clooney episode was when he was doing something for a charity, and he was going to, I don't know, was it Sudan or somewhere like that?
Yeah, he was running an organisation in Sudan, and he just happened to be flying through, and so we wanted to interview him and talk to him about the good work that he was doing there.
As you do. I gather you also helped to lead an expedition to somewhere in Siberia, which is the coldest inhabited place on Earth.
That's right, Oymyakon, which is in the Yakutia region, in the far east of Siberia. It's further east than Japan, believe it or not. It took 3 days of driving along a frozen river to get to this village, and it claims to be the coldest inhabited place on Earth. And they regularly have temperatures of minus 60 degrees Celsius, although by that time it's the same as Fahrenheit. And they've got the coldest recorded temperature, I think, 72 below. So you can imagine, pretty chilly. I mean, when we were there, it was a balmy minus 40, so it wasn't too bad.
I know that. I mean, you're very, very keen on photography now. In fact, I know you've had one or two successful exhibitions. Do cameras work in those sort of temperatures?
They just about do, but you have to take a lot of batteries, because batteries go very, very quickly. So you have to employ some very clever tricks on how to make things work. But it's the kind of temperatures where you can leave a banana outside in the cold for 10 minutes and then it just freezes solid, or it's the place where you throw water in the air and it just turns to snow immediately. So it's quite a remarkable scene. So the hardest thing is just keeping yourself safe so you don't lose your fingers most of the time.
I know you've done the Americas as well. You've made 6 documentaries, I think, at least. And how many books have you written?
I've written. I'm on my 10th book now, actually. Yeah, so quite a few.
So what next?
What next? Well, I think like everybody, I'm just looking forward to getting away. I've got a couple of other books in the pipeline. I'm working on a novel, which will be it's been an interesting challenge, and a couple more documentaries which are teed up, good to go, but just waiting for the borders to open and the world to hopefully get back to some sense of normality.
Well, we've got lots of questions for you. Monica in Los Angeles says, how do you prepare for your expeditions mentally and physically?
Sure. Well, it's mentally, a lot of the time is just organizing your life so that if you're going away for 6 months, you're not going to come back to a load of electricity bills that you've forgotten about. It's just the basics like that you can all too easily overlook in favor of the more glamorous things, but a lot of it's just admin. It's getting the right visas, getting the right permissions if you're filming in places. So the kind of the fun stuff all gets shunted to the last sort of day before you leave, when you're actually going out shopping for a new pair of boots. So a lot of the practicalities is the boring stuff. So it's not always as glamorous as people think. Physically, again, just depends on where you're going. But because I'm going away for such long periods normally, there's not really much point in spending 6 months walking training before walking in. So it's a case of building up gradually and not going too hard or fast too soon.
Yeah, I mean, do you, when you're walking, you're in a wilderness somewhere, you're in a desert, do you long to get to the next stop so you can check your emails?
What's quite nice often is having an excuse not to check your email. I take quite a lot of joy in putting my out of office, and I'll say I'll see you next year. People can take it or leave it, really. Often, a lot of people don't get that. Don't get that privilege. So having a bit of quiet time, having that break I think it's very good for you. So I think everybody should try and factor that into their lives. You don't necessarily need to go and pack yourself off to the Antarctic, but if you have the opportunity to do so and can get away with it, just go and do it, because it's so good for you emotionally to not be always connected to a device.
I think it's quite cool having a sort of automated out-of-office reply that says, sorry, I'm in the Sahara. I'll try it sometime. Diana in Berkshire says, is there one piece of kit that you wouldn't be without on any of your expeditions?
Funnily enough, I always take one clean white linen shirt everywhere I go. Purely because you never know who you're going to meet. And there's been plenty of times, even in the middle of the mountains or the jungle or the deserts, where you're sort of summoned by the local chief or the local army commander, or one time the Dalai Lama, to go and meet him. And I was just very glad to have one sort of semi-smart shirt that I could go in and not look like a complete sort of tramp. So it's definitely paid off on many occasions, because appearances count for a lot, particularly in tribal societies, where if you just turn up with your ripped t-shirt covered in mud, you're not going to get a very good reception.
So did you just bump into the Dalai Lama? You just happened, where was it? And
this is in Dharamsala in the Himalayas, where I was walking through, and of course I wanted to try and meet him, but he just, he's a very busy man and he gets a lot of requests. But we met one of his monks, and he invited us to come to a private reception. So we were very kindly invited and went along, and he gave us half an hour. He sat down, invited me in for a cup of tea, and we had a great chat.
Did he say anything incredibly wise that's changed your life? I gather he has a really good sense of humour.
He does. He's always smiling, always making jokes. He was actually giving me some very practical advice on how to sneak across the border into China, should ever I so wish.
I love it. Travel tips from the Dalai Lama. Brian in Colorado says, how do you stop yourself voicing criticism of location politics? If you come across something that makes you uncomfortable, and there must be some cultures where you have, I think of their treatment of women and children in some places, are you ever tempted to have your say, or do you just keep stum?
So I think there's, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if you go into a place with an agenda and too many preconceived ideas, you're not going to learn much, and you're not going to probably get a particularly good reception if you're going in trying to impose your own ideas on a place that's often very different. That said, there are some things that wind me up. There are some things that I find distasteful or just downright awful that I can't help but raise a voice about. And I think by showing these things, whatever, the good, the bad, and the ugly, on, in my books and on my documentaries, people can make their own minds up about it. I certainly don't shy away from the hard-hitting subjects, and actually often there's no way around controversy. So I think it's down to the audience to decide their own views on these things.
Yeah, I mean, I know that at some point you met some wives and children of IS fighters.
Yeah, I met some ISIS fighters myself. You saw the Arabia sort of documentary sizzle there. I was on the front line in Iraq with the Iraqi security forces fighting against ISIS, and we captured 3 ISIS commanders. And it was, I was kind of torn, because on the one hand, these were definitely the bad guys, but they'd been caught, and they were driven off to a fate unknown. So
yeah, can be uncomfortable, I can imagine. Evan in New York says, we know you've done the United States. Your favorite place in the US?
Wow, well, this is very good. This is very timely, actually, because I've I just fell in love with Colorado, and yeah, I've actually just bought a plot of land out there, so I'm going to go a bit of ranch land. So I will be spending a lot more time out in Colorado in the near future.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Yeah. Sarah and Mike in London, where you are now, says, after walking the Nile and the Himalayas, where's next? Yes. Well, where is next? You said you've got lots of ideas and you've still got a couple of books and the novel to write, but are you planning another big deal expedition?
I've got probably 3 or 4 big deal expeditions that are in the pipeline. I probably can't say where they are just now, sadly. I'm going to keep these things under wraps because somebody else will steal my idea and go and do it. But yeah, I have to kind of plan 5 years in advance for these things, because, you know, if I'm juggling a few ideas, I might be planning one for next year, one for the year after, one for the year after that. So yeah, I've got a whole pipeline of big expeditions that are ready and waiting. Obviously, the pandemic has put a 2-year delay in everything, but I'm ready and good to go as soon as the borders open.
And Peter in the United States, I don't know where in the US, he says, when is your latest book out? It's actually today, isn't it? Your latest book. So
3rd of June today, yeah.
That's right, absolutely. And you've got all that planning and plotting to do. And what do you think of what Sir Michael Palin said about you? He revolutionized the whole way we do travelogue type programs, and he has his own way of doing them, and it's extraordinary, and he's got a huge following. But he's sort of passed the baton to you. He said you've breathed new life into the whole thing. What do you think of that?
Well, Sir Michael, you know, he was one of my earliest inspirations. I watched all of his shows when I was younger. And just thought, wow, what an incredible man. And I was very lucky a couple of years back to be asked to present him with his Lifetime Achievement Award at a travel writing awards ceremony. So that was a real honour. And actually, since then, we've kind of remained in touch, and we actually went for a little walk up on Hampstead Heath the other day.
No, real expedition for you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a very kind gentleman. Yeah.
He is. He's absolutely lovely. But it's a heck of an accolade to come from him. He's sort of said, all right, you're doing it now. And you certainly are. It's amazing. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would you have known that you would be doing this sort of?
I definitely hoped that I would be doing this. But, you know, I suppose when you're younger, you sort of you feel as though you've got your whole life ahead of you. But with that youth comes not necessarily the confidence to do it, and luckily I know I sort of had a series of events, you know, being in the army that gave me the shove across the line that I said, right, I'm going to go and follow this through and do it. But no, I mean, this is it's exceeded my wildest dreams that I've been able to do all of the things that I've done, and be very fortunate to do this for my career, and it's been great.
And when you do your travel programs on the television, who watches you? Is there a particular sort of person, male or female or anything? Is there a sort of person that watches you, or is it very general?
It seems to be very general, actually, and I always find it wonderful when, you know, I get lots of letters and emails from people in the audience who it seems to have resonated with, and that's been everything from, you know, young children to people very much at the other end of the spectrum, and you know, I think my journeys are for everyone. Anyone can be an explorer, anyone can enjoy travel, and hopefully it does resonate with people all around the world of all ages.
Well, it's encouraging in a way, isn't it, that people are still curious about the world and that you're giving them an insight.
The world is still a very big place. There's lots of fascinating things to do, and lots of interesting people to meet. So I think for every generation, travel will always hold an appeal.
Well, there's a lot more work for you to do then, isn't there? No horizon at all. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. And the best of luck with the new book. You don't need a wish of luck from me, because it sounds as though it's sold out already. But and we'll wait and watch to see where you go next. Like I said, we will be following your journeys. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us today.
Joanne, thanks for having me on.
It's been absolutely smashing. Thank you. And thank you too for watching another week here on Viking TV. Keep safe, keep well. I'll be with you again next week.